Is our friend Spencer coming?
He's going to
Not
miss
for
this
this item.
first item.
He'll come after, like he's recusing from this.
Okay, got it.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:07 p.m. I'd like to announce that this meeting is being recorded. May I have a roll call?
Director Aguilar,
Here.
Topple,
Here.
Freeman. Here. Craig.
Here.
Deschler.
Here.
Shaw.
Here.
Director Brandt's going to recuse himself from the beginning of the meeting. First item.
Thank you. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Anascoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue the tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties and continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. This time, I'd like to move on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions from directors or comments on the agenda?
I just noted on the support for the pedicab project, it was written as I support that, and I would think that the board is going to support that, so it should be we.
Yes, I can change that.
And otherwise, I'd like to move approval of the consent agenda.
All right. We have the second by Director Freeman. Is there any public comment on this motion? I see no public comment on this motion, so I'll go to a vote. All directors who are in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. And this motion passes 6-0-0-1. Now I'd like to move on to our third area, our public comment period. At this time, any member of the public may speak on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board of directors that are not on the agenda. The board will not take action on any item not on the agenda except as provided by law. Please raise your hand, either in person or on Zoom. And when I call on you, please share your name and then your comments. Is there any public comments? Yes.
My name is Henry Soria, 36-year resident of Isla Vista. It's been brought to my attention that we're losing trees big time and on county property, meaning the areas between the sidewalk and the street. And I was wondering if the Community Services District could take it upon the county to possibly start replacing some of the foliage or plant life that we've lost. Just over here, on this side over here, there's a couple of trees that they're definitely dying, but they need replacement. So I'm just asking for more trees. Better. We also have these malleolucas that in Florida they're a nuisance. Out here they're just annoying. But possible replacement of the malleolucas. Consult with an arborist and see what they say. So this is it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other public comments at this time? Are there any on Zoom?
No.
All right. At this point, we'll move on to our discussion action items. Our first item is a presentation on county policy on Isla Vista Bluffs.
I'll turn it over to Director Lisa Plowman from the County Planning and Development Department, and I can drive for you.
Oh, sure. That'd be fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us. Where's the slide presentation going to be? Up there?
Right behind you.
Okay.
Pulling it
I'm
up.
going to stand up because I'm just a little more comfortable when I can see the screen. We know there's obviously a lot of interest and concern around the bluffs. There have been for decades. I was a student here at IVCSD from 1983 to 1987, and have worked with the county for on and off for now about 16 years, and actually was very involved in the Isla Vista Master Plan that never quite made it across the finish line, but hopefully maybe will someday. So I've been the director at the department now for about 5 years, and during this time, we've had a number of things happen associated with the bluffs. One of those things was updating our policies, but I'm gonna start out. So here's an aerial photograph of the bluffs, so you all know well. Next slide. So this just gives you some background and history about how the bluffs have developed over time. So in 1928, we had less than a dozen structures on the bluffs. 25 in 1956. Quite see what the number is there. 60.
Yeah, I can't
In
move it.
1975, and then now we have 84 structures. Next slide. So the purpose of the Ivy Bluff policy really was to protect the welfare of the individuals that are living in the structures that are on the bluff side of Del Playa. And the policy was first established in 2004, and really relates to what happens as the bluff erodes and structures get closer and closer to the edge. That policy was revised in 2020 after there was the sloughing of a substantial portion of a bluff that we hadn't seen previously. And so the county contracted with Cotton Shire, some engineering firm, to do a report on that. We took public comment on it, and the policy was changed. And that policy basically then said, hey, now we expect that there can be up to 10 feet of sloughing at any one time, and we had not previously seen that. Next slide. So this is exactly what I just said, is that the building official determined that the 10-foot threshold will be set as the minimum. Next slide. So, I don't move your head. There we go. There we go. So our policy starts with different measurements of the structure from the bluff top. So at 20 feet, so any portion of the building foundation is within 20 feet of the bluff, we send a notification to the property owner requesting a geotech study specific to that site question. So every property on the bluff has received a letter, either mandating a geotech study or recommending a geotech study. So properties within 15 feet. So if we have a portion of a foundation within 15 feet, we issue a notice of violation to that property owner requiring a geotechnical study that basically informs us about the stability of that structure and the condition of that bluff, and then may make recommendations about ways to stabilize it. And we have seen that happen in a number of instances. Next slide. Properties within 10 feet. So if any portion of that foundation is now within 10 feet of the bluff edge, the county issues a notice to vacate those specific portions of the structure that are within that 10-foot threshold. And then they're required to hire the geotechnical engineer to prepare the study and establish a maximum collapse width during a single event for that site. And in some circumstances, and one of our inspectors, Carl Lindbergh, is here with us tonight, which is great because he's got a lot of experience with bluff. But in some circumstances, what you'll see, and we have some photographs of this, is that we will require that the building be cut back. If the geotechnical report comes back with that recommendation, we cut that building back, we create a larger bluff setback. And in some cases, there might be lateral supports that are developed that support the structure from the street out towards the bluff. Next slide, please. So we do require permits for the work that we have that gets done out there. Sometimes it's emergency permits, and that's when we think, look, they need to do this work in advance of us being able to get them a permit and get them through the process. Because permitting can take time. As some of you may know, if you've ever gotten a permit, it takes some time. So we can issue an emergency permit. They have to follow up with a coastal development permit after that, but at least allows them to do the work immediately. we have a dangerous situation. And then we also require building permits subsequent to the coastal development permit. So one is a planning permit and one is a building permit. Two separate permits are required in that situation. And then all proposed foundation strengthening has to conform to our IV Bluff submittal requirements and permit process that we have established. Next slide. So here's the summary of what we just talked about. I won't walk through it again, but essentially, as you move closer to the bluff, the requirements for studies and additional work ratchet up. Next slide. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the monitoring that we do on the bluffs. So, Jonathan, you're everywhere. Okay, site inspections. So we typically do 4 inspections per year, regardless of what the storms are, if we have any kind of earthquake event. Because we want to make sure that we can monitor what's happening and then we document that information. And Carl is the one that goes and walks when the tides are low and preserves photographs, etc., so we can document that information. It's hard for us to get onto the properties because we have to get permission from the landowner to do that, so we do things from the ocean side. We visit after significant events. So if there's a major storm, we will go out. If there are king tides, we will go out to make sure that we haven't seen anything happen out on the bluffs that we didn't expect. In this case, right now we're working with the fire department, and we started that last January. We started flying drones. So before major storm events and after major storm events, we have the fire department fly that drone for us, and then we can, it's a great view of the bluff top properties, and then we can spot areas that are problematic.
Jonathan face.
Jonathan, thank you. So outreach during storm events. So what we have been doing, because I basically, in my time here, we've had 2 significant events, last January 2023 and then this year. So we developed notices for the properties that we are monitoring and that we are concerned about. And the sheriff goes door to door and hands those notices to the people living in those structures saying, do not go out on the bluffs. You should not be out there. And Jonathan helped this year in posting some of that on social media. We also notify the property owners, look, your tenants should not be going out on the bluffs. You should make sure that they remain safe. So that happens whenever we expect to have something that we think could erode the bluff top. So our ongoing outreach is really, between 2020 and 2024, we've been sending these notices out to the property owners to ask them if they don't meet our threshold in terms of distance to prepare those geologic technical studies. Not everybody does. Some do not. And then we have done, hundreds of field inspections and done a lot of reviews of the technical studies that we do get. And then we work with the landowner to implement those improvements that come from that study. Next slide. So, we all know the tragedy that we have seen in Isla Vista. And Supervisor Capps had a presentation earlier this year that talked about the 13 individuals that have lost their life, which is, it's just a horrible thing, right? We've seen a lot of loss of life in IV, unfortunately, other events as well. But this is something we can hope do more about rather than a random event. And so one of the things that we have done is change the height requirement of the fence within 5 feet of the bluff. So we have seen students go over fencing, and in some cases, that's how they've died. So what we have done, I think next slide. is increase that fence height to 6 feet. So that is a requirement now. Now, that doesn't mean that every landowner is gonna do that right away. Because we can't require it and force them to come in to get a permit, but when they modify their permits, they're required to bring that up to code, because their existing fencing, if it's lower than 6 feet, will be non-conforming. But there has been an effort to reach out to the landowners to try and encourage them, and the second district has offered to help support the effort through helping fund some of those permit applications to make it easier for the landowners to go ahead and do this type of thing. Slide next. So I want to talk about and identify some of the properties that we've worked on. So this is 6757. This is a building where we red tagged it, and this property is going to be demoed. So, and you can see it's quite problematic, right? Next slide. So that's kind of the extreme, right? The whole building's going to be torn down. So in this instance, this is 6625 Delphia. And here, what you have is cantilever beams that come out and create additional support for that structure. Next slide. And in this case, we have some sections of the bluff that are different, right? So this is down in the 6800 block, and you have quite a substantial setback from the existing structures, and so we don't see problems in this area. And as I said, one of the other things, I don't have a photo of it, is where we have instructed people to cut their buildings back, and then they move that back, and then they reconstruct that front, or the rear side of that structure. Yeah. Carl, how many of those do you think we have?
That have been cut back?
Yeah.
There've been dozens.
Dozens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some buildings, several times. That one that's gonna be cut back again, have gone through at least 3 cutbacks before.
Okay.
People do it.
So that really creates, and allows me to present with the summary of our approach. We're very diligent, we're very actively involved. We want to make sure that the students are safe and the residents are safe in Isla Vista. This is going to be an ongoing issue that we're going to have to monitor in perpetuity as long as we have structures. Eventually, I think all those structures will go away, and the other side will then be oceanfront property, but that'll probably take quite a bit of time. But I'm happy to answer any questions that people have.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to ask my fellow directors if they have any questions to start. Director Freeman.
I'm curious, the properties that had the very large amount of structural damage over the course of the last couple weeks. I'm wondering how those properties fit into this compliance schedule before. Were they very close to the edge before? Were they particularly far from it? There was a lot of wear on the cliff in a very short period of time. I'm just wondering, like, now that we've kind of learned what the framework of the county is, I'm curious to know how that works.
So we had one property that had a patio collapse at the corner. And when we went out there and looked at it, we realized that the structure was still set back sufficiently from that. The students were allowed to return to that structure in the afternoon, and the landowner was required to bring out fencing from Marburg to put up the fencing to prevent students from getting any closer into the area where the patio had collapsed. And then they were required to cut back that patio to prevent any other damage or concrete that would potentially fall to the beach.
Okay, thank you. I see in your answer what I was kind of like the disconnect I was experiencing momentarily, which is that your policy is that any portion of the building foundation is within these various distances.
Right.
And so the patio was allowed to stick out seemingly quite a bit into the danger zone. And I'm wondering.
But we often have them cut those patios back.
Okay.
We do.
What is the county, like, I don't know if it's thought processes or policy or what mechanism ends up causing those requests to come back?
I mean, if we see that, if we think it's dangerous and there's the potential for it to detach, we will have them cut it back. If it's undermined substantially underneath from the bluff, we will have them cut it back.
What I'm wondering about is, so, and I appreciate there's no policy that's perfect. There's no mechanism that would end up preventing all issues. But I'm just curious that there was, if somebody had been standing on that balcony, that could have been very dangerous. I'm wondering, there was some mechanism we have determining that the balcony is dangerous enough that we're requesting it to be moved back and things like that. And that apparently wasn't used in this circumstance with
Yeah, I mean,
Kriegel and Evan.
yeah, previous to that, because we have photographs of it before and after, there was soil. There was ground underneath that patio previously. And then it was gone.
So
Yeah, so that's hard to predict.
Oh, yeah.
That's very hard to predict. So that's why we are monitoring and we go out, we look to see when there are events that might result in the softening of the soil or where you might see erosion. So it is incredibly hard to predict where that's going to happen. No question about
If that level of event were to happen again, I guess the thing that I'm wondering is how many more properties right now are on Isla Vista that have balconies that are so close that that level of random event would end up causing more potential concern. And again, I appreciate it. I mean, the perfect policy is you don't have properties anywhere and buildings anywhere.
Yeah.
And even then the safest thing would be not have anyone on the south side of Del Playa. And so I appreciate that that's not possible. That's not reasonable. That's not something I'm asking for. I'm just trying to understand like where we are right now in the relation of danger, given the idea that, okay, well, this happened last week. I want to understand, is this the kind of thing that could happen again next year, or now it's really, really important?
I'm not going to say it couldn't happen. I think it could happen. But in my 5 years here, I think I've seen patios cut back. I mean, what would you say, Carl? How often do we see that happen?
Patios are cut back quite frequently. Some properties several times a year as the events arise.
Right.
And the balcony that failed, if you look at close at the picture, you'll see it you'll see two safety fences, we call them. One is outboard, one's located about 5 feet in. Just keep that distance there. So if somebody were out at on that rail, they would have been shooken, but they would have not fallen off that. And the property owners, for the most part, are very responsive. They want to do that and say.
So it was at the outer rail rather than the inner rail.
Yeah, it's moved back, and there's also a great effort to maintain coverage of the earth. A lot of people have the belief, pretty well founded, that moisture is going to come from the top, and any exposed dirt is going to absorb and weaken the soil and cause it to collapse. People cling very desperately and logically to having that patio cover and impervious cap to that soil, that they really hold on to that. So that way you'll see the rails move back and they fight to keep that coverage because they believe it to be a protective measure that they can take. But eventually, like Lisa says, they will retreat. The bluff is going to win.
So there is a, as I said, there's a requirement that the fence be 5 feet back from the bluff. So as I didn't mention this, but Carl just did, is that there was the outer fence and there was the inner fence. And the collapse was outside of the inner fence, but by the outer fence. So that's one of the ways in which you try and ensure that nobody will be harmed by a situation like
It's all very useful clarification. Thank you so much.
Dr. Dashler.
I wanted to follow up on something that Jay brought up. So in this recent storm, there was this emergency notice and storm safety tips, and I think it was sent out by IVCSD, but probably in collaboration with you all. And there was 12 properties that were identified by the county because there had been a bluff failure on the property, or could be subject to bluff failure. And what I was struck by in looking at those properties is that the area of the 3 most recent properties where we had to evacuate people, those were not part of this list? And is it because there was so much impact to the bluffs at those three locations, the 67, 41, 43, 47 in the most recent storm? I was just surprised that there was an incident that required evacuation and these were not on a list that was being looked at.
You know what, I would have to research that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just
Why?
curious. So what is the criteria by which these 12 properties?
Carl, you wanna?
Oh,
Yeah, I want to say, I saw that list before, I went down, and it was my.
Carl?
Yeah.
You come up here.
Camera can't catch you, can't hear you.
I wasn't prepared to speak, but I didn't.
Thank you, though.
Um, these were the properties that were noticed, the ones that were not noticed, I was asked to review the list beforehand, and I did not include them on that list. They had remnants of a strong structure underneath it, and it was my mistake that they should have been included on the list. I would say that. There is substantial structure still underneath there. You'll see that if you look close at the picture, there are caissons that were drilled into the earth that come out at approximately a 45-degree angle. That's what kept that deck from collapsing all the way down. That deck is now on the beach. It has been cut off, but that should have been included. But that was my fault. I looked at that list ahead of time. I added the neighbor that's right above it to the west. That made the list. And it was my mistake. I should have included that on it.
that's helpful because I was thinking it wasn't on your radar and that the storm was so impactful that it then caused a huge impact. So I guess what you're saying, it was on your radar.
Yeah, it is on the radar, and
Yeah.
it's on we're watching that.
That's
one of the most
helpful. Thank you.
challenging positions on that bluff, right there. There's an
Yeah.
active earthquake fault right there, an ancient earthquake fault.
And then I have other questions, but I don't want to go into the time characteristic for me, but I just wanted to ask about your outreach. How do you find that your communication is with property owners? And do you feel like I noticed you said you email people. I bring that up because on the afternoon when we got this notification, I talked to Jonathan and he was actually going to go door to door to some of these properties to let folks know that these 12 properties were on the list. And I just wonder, can we be assured that when you all contact property owners, property managers, that the tenants are also getting that same information?
So the sheriff goes door to door.
Oh, okay, I heard you say that. Okay, cool. For all 13 of these
They
properties?
tape it on the door.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
My questions too were about notice to tenants. The policy seems oriented towards the property owners. And I heard you say that sometimes they're instructed to do a geological survey, but they don't. And also that you can't get on the property, so you have to either use drones or be down on the beach. And so I'm just wondering, are there such protections to the landlords and the owners that there's not a direct line for the tenants to find out what's the story with the property that I'm about to rent? How far is the foundation from danger? What kind of issues are going on?
I mean, these are, like, we are required to communicate directly with the landowner, right? To request these studies, and that is what we do. The people that are required to do them, they get a notice of violation and we can start levying fines if they don't actually produce the study. The people that maybe don't respond, it's recommended for them. So we are certainly happy to work with people who are interested in renting a place and they want to know more information about it. This is all public information. It's all available through our website, or they can call us, we'll give them information about it. But we don't go out and reach out to tenants and explain what it is we're doing with the landowner. We rely on the landowner to be communicating with their tenants about the structure that they're living
And is your material easily searchable by a tenant? If we
I think
educated
it
them about
is. Yeah, but we're happy to help if somebody
Uh-huh.
has trouble. They can certainly call our department, call the building division and help them get the information about their
Well,
particular
we
site.
certainly find with the amount of turnover that we have in Isla Vista, it often takes people a while to orient to the community and know what their rights are, what information is available to them. And it does seem like it's important for tenants to understand that.
Oh,
That's
I had a question I wanted to ask. So, we learned tonight about the inclusion of using drones as technology. That started in 23, correct?
We started in January.
So
When we had
last
big
January.
storms in January, yeah. last
And
year.
so in the presentation, it mentions the ability to do it after storm events. Is there a huge burden that, can be assisted or we could recommend that there be more just regular drone check? Because we do have a lot of high tides just with a lack of sediment in Isla Vista. So it can be hard to do a on-foot check on a regular basis versus drones are a lot more common of a tool these days, that we can have more regular inspections with a safe tool where a human doesn't have to put themselves at risk. We can have more information to share with our neighbors.
Yeah, so my department does not have a drone or a drone pilot. But we do work with the fire department and they've been very, very helpful. And we can certainly look into maybe a regular schedule of having the drone flights. They're usually very willing to come out and do that for us.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I guess what I'd like to ask you, I know Supervisor Hatch has been really instrumental in kind of leading the charge to kind of crack down and look at the bluff safety issues. And what I wonder is there anything in your mind that you all think we collectively should be doing to make the bluffs safer? You have this great bluff policy. Does the limits need to be changed in terms of setbacks? Can we mandate that property owners have to have higher fencing without going through a building permit, just like you got to do it? I mean, what kinds of things are there out there that maybe you're frustrated that you all can't do under current laws, regulations that you'd like to do? I'm just curious if there's things that we haven't thought of.
Well, I feel like, and this is hard because we have a transitory population, but education. I mean, the accidents happen maybe because the individuals aren't educated about where they are. But I think the policy is just been recently updated, so I feel comfortable with the policy where it is now. But I think, how do we help students make better decisions about that? How do we make them aware about the risks that are associated with living along the bluff, or going to parties at the bluff, or whatever it is? Signage, I know we do have some signage up, but that to me feels like a really critical part of it that this group can certainly help with. And I know Jonathan was helpful in terms of the notifications that we did for the storm just recently.
We do have a flyer, like a bluff safety flyer that we distributed at the beginning of the year, and we're gonna do another round of that too. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, has the district thought about working with the landowners, asking if they would include that information with the leases? Or, it's hard to say whether they're gonna want to do that, but I mean, why not?
It's
Right.
been an idea.
Yeah.
But I don't know, yeah, we can't apply it. So,
Yeah, right,
Yeah, it's been an
right.
idea.
All right, I don't see any current questions from my board members, so I'll open this discussion for questions and comments to the public. If there is any public comment on this presentation we received, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Please share your name. Yes. Yes.
I'm Tara Robinson. Actually wrote a thesis last year about district coastal management. I'm sure I've interacted with many of you guys in my research. I did have a couple clarifying questions. You mentioned about how the balconies are like not, or from my impression, it seems like those geotechnical reports that you do are looking specifically at the foundations, but then the balconies are kind of like a separate thing when you're looking at the structural support of that. Are those also assessed in those geotechnical assessments, or are those assessed by your guys' regular like inspections?
If I can answer that, there are some decks out there that are monitored annually by the engineer of record. Some of these are the most spectacular looking structures out there are the ones with the exposed caissons, kind of looks like the Greek Parthenon with a deck that extends out. These are engineered structures that are capable of cantilevering out and can support the loads. Those are evaluated every year. There's a number of those like that. One engineer, a group of engineers did these, I think, early 90s, and so those are a unique situation. Other ones are supported conventionally, shown the ground. So there are a couple different classes there. Okay. Some are heavily engineered, look spooky, but they're sound.
And then I did have another question about, so you mentioned that there are some property owners where you'll send them notices of violation and they will not comply. I guess my question is, what are the penalizations for that? And I guess, like, is the cost of that penalty comparable to the cost that it would to have them redo another geotechnical survey or assessment?
I can say through the years I've seen it. We had one person since 595. The former owner was she didn't care much for being told what to do. She was very private, and she resisted all contact.
Oh, this is the single family
Yeah,
home. Yeah, she was living there herself.
Yeah, she was living there herself. Beautiful little old house. It's going to be torn down in the next few days or weeks. Somebody else bought it. She passed away, fortunately. That's going to be resolved. Most people are very cooperative and want to maintain what they've got there and keep it going.
But we have a process where you issue a notice of violation and they have a certain amount of time to respond. And if they don't respond, then you issue a notice of determination of fines. And then so we can start finding them. And they don't, I mean, most landlords don't want to get into that situation. They want to cooperate. They've got a lot of money invested in these properties.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure they're safe because they want kids living in them. Yeah.
And then I just had another question. You mentioned how like those patios are kind of like, you said, are seen as kind of these impervious caps that will like prevent against erosion. Have you seen any evidence where like having those patios over it doesn't impact or like there's less erosion than maybe structures that are nearby that don't have as patios that extend out like as far?
Yeah, you can see examples of that.
Okay.
How that does work. There comes a point where the rock will erode from the bottom, and at some point you just can't support the load anymore. It'll cave. But you can protect that erosion.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Supervisor.
Well, thanks to everyone here. Clearly, we all care about the safety of people living in Isla Vista, and thanks for holding this, and thanks to our planning department. And Tara, I read your thesis and learned a lot from it. So my question has to build on yours of load on the balcony, because I know we inspect all over the county, but we have a particular element here in Isla Vista with the high volume of people on a balcony any given night or day. Is that taken into consideration? Is that, I mean, I know you're an engineer, it's about structures, but what about human behavior and the fact that there could be hundreds of people on a balcony that would be ideally designed for 6 people in any other situation? So is that part of the assessment? Because I think that is a grave concern of mine of how many people you have there, and is that unique variable added into the assessment that a place would be safe?
Human loading, you can get more people per square foot in an area with people than you could with a motor vehicle. You can get more weight
Sure.
on a set piece of ground. with people. I don't know the requirements engineering wise for a cantilever deck or a patio like that, given the situation. I don't know the calculation that goes into that. That has to be factored in. I'm sure it is. But,
In the studies that are being done by the individual.
yeah,
engineering companies.
and I would think that there must be some limit. We've all seen examples of huge parties out in Isla Vista.
Sure.
Where uninvited guests can get on these patios, and that definitely create an overload situation that it could make matters worse.
Sure, so if I understand right, the companies that the owners are required to do these studies would take that into assessment, and not the county, that would be something that
They would be analyzing.
but if the landowners aren't doing those assessments, they're just defying the rule, then we don't have that, then that information isn't found.
But they may not, the people that aren't doing the studies, I mean, like, basically, I think we're working to bring everybody into compliance. So the people that aren't doing the studies are people that aren't required to because they're not close enough to the bluff yet.
Okay,
Yeah, so those people have not.
I thought you indicated that some landowners were just not doing the studies.
There
What I'm getting at is I want to make
The
sure.
recommended studies, they're not doing the required studies. We bring those people into.
If you're far enough
Okay.
back, you don't need to do it. It's not required.
It's just recommended. So sometimes those people won't do that. A lot of times. They won't.
So what I'm getting at is also to Director Deschler's question, how can we do better?
It's kind of like it's similar to like a building that has a max capacity from a fire perspective, right?
Yeah,
You see, there's a max capacity, but people don't always follow that.
right.
Yeah, so that's the human element that's very hard to control.
So is a max capacity part of these studies? I mean, per apartment or per balcony, is that number known? Could that number be known?
I don't personally know that, so I would
Okay.
have to look into exactly what these engineering studies are including. I don't know, Craig, if you.
I'm Craig, by the way, I'm sorry I'm late.
This is our building official,
Yeah.
Craig
Sorry.
Johnson, sorry.
They're designed for a very high load, but I agree it's a legitimate concern. I mean, all the engineers, the licensed structural engineers, that design these, they know very well where they are, you know exactly what's going on out there. They're designed for a very high load, but yeah, it's a concern. The railings along the edge of the bluff are a concern if you get 50 people all pushing on that all at the same time.
Right.
I've seen the pictures of the gatherings out there. A lot of people, and it's a legitimate concern. They're following what's state and county law, but that's not a guarantee.
So could it be a tangible outcome of this work is that each property, that number of people on the balcony is a known number, both to the landlord, to the public, and to the tenants? I mean,
Like
it's,
what the safe load is.
yeah,
No more than
Right.
X number of
Yeah,
people.
I mean, maybe it's even posted, right?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah, like you post in a building.
Yeah.
Here's what your max capacity is. You have to have that.
right.
Fire department puts that
I mean,
in.
how do we find out that number? We'd have to go to all these studies that are required, is that correct?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we. Like we could do that research. We could, that number could be known, correct?
Yeah.
At least that would be informing and educating and empowering students to
So
understand.
we'd have to ask the engineers that are doing the studies to give us something like that. But I assume that it could be determined.
Yeah.
Sure,
Sure.
yeah. I happened to be up in the Bay Area when Golden Gate Bridge had a celebration, and they closed the bridge to vehicle traffic for the day. People walked out there for a few hours, and a couple of people had the idea, let's make the bridge swing by shifting back and forth. Let's make it rock. I wasn't on the bridge
Oh,
at
it
the
gives me
time,
the chills, yeah.
but
Okay.
they got it going,
Sure.
and it started moving. They got maybe 3-4 feet out of that, and they realized, hey, stop this. You know, they realized structures are dynamic like this. You know, there are limits to it, so.
Those were adults.
Yeah. Yeah, they were walking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, okay, my last point is, I have heard just anecdotally to the students I've spoken with who live at those buildings, that their leases do have information about bluff safety. Does anyone have access to those leases, or could we make that? If anyone does, I would like to see that, to see how I think that might be or I don't know if that's a requirement or if that's something we could work on. If it's, I know these leases are often state generated, but anyway, I just think that that would also be a tangible thing. And that number of balcony load could be very much visible as part of your lease so that there's a better understanding of what the risks are. Anyway, if anybody is in touch with I've asked a bunch of students, and of course they don't have copies of their lease, but maybe at the start of the term or something, we could be more proactive.
Yes, Ms. Sutar.
Again, Sutar, speaking only for myself. Thank you so much for putting it together and putting out the information for us. I have two questions and one concern. First question, out of that group that are along the south side, how many of them right now have been tagged to have their balconies or their structures pulled back?
There's been a lot of cutbacks. I don't know the number right now. That's
Yeah.
pending
They're attending,
approximately.
there are 4 permits to demolish and move further back. Right, that I know about right now. I think the 2 of them I know are waiting for the order to get in when the buildings are vacated over summer. The work will be done there. Those are on the 6700 block. There's 2 there. And then there are a couple other further toward the university, closer to the university. Right now, that's.
And when somebody is asked to remove portions of their balcony, I imagine that they are required to not just drop it on the beach and to take it away.
That's the ideal situation. It doesn't happen. They have a machine that looks like a giant crab that go out there to grab it and they cut it, pulls it back. That's not always, it's not always you're not always able to get that machine on the property. In those cases, they can cut it off, it'll drop to the ground, and then it'll be demolished there. It's important to know too, it's a little different demolishing the concrete that's in place there. You can't use vibratory tools, you can't use a jackhammer, it's going to shake the ground worse and create more trouble. So we saw cut it. They saw cut it off in sections, segment alike, and then they break it up when they get down to the ground. You know, we do issue notice of violation. We leave concrete behind.
Okay. And then for accidental falls, not one that has been requested, is there any kind of watchdog system to make sure that that stuff comes up off the beach?
Yeah, there is, and honestly, it's pretty complicated. If you walk along the beach, you'll notice the sand coming and going. Sometimes it's just a black mudstone there. Other times it's covered, next day by a couple feet of sand. And the wave action is very strong out there. Concrete does shift and wash away.
Yeah, I'm not a structural engineer and I'm not a geologist, but I've been watching for 40 years now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've observed is that a lot of the caissons and balconies, when they fall, they get broken up into little pieces, and little pieces become like little scrubbing rocks up against the cliffs. And you can see the indentations when you walk the beach, when there is no sand and the tide is low, it's almost, if property owners do not remove that stuff, they create almost extra damage, I believe. So I would hope there could be some kind of education process or just some kind of oversight to get as much of that out of there as possible. And then my concern is echoing what Supervisor Cap says, and that's about the loads on the balconies. There's so much fear around Deltopia already, and to think about, and you can see it, go onto YouTube, and you can see the drone footage of what happens out on those balconies. And I understand, yes, some of them are structurally safe. They've got the big caissons, they've got the vertical stuff, the horizontal stuff all happening. But there's a lot of them where it's just concrete, and then there's an inner fence.
And so there's always that concern that when you have one of those big parties and you have people who don't live here, they may not understand that walking over that fence, there's 7 feet out there and it's really crowded, and maybe I'll go out to that 7 feet. So that to me is a huge concern, especially as we approach these big party weekends coming up in the spring. So in terms of requesting property owners to remove sections of balcony that are deemed unsafe, I would hope that would be a priority.
I think this is one area where the raised fence height will help along the individual properties.
Yeah, that's not gonna be triggered until they actually do something
Right.
on there. And I appreciate
No, that's true
Supervisor
though.
Katz, I
That's
totally
true.
appreciate
Yeah.
the effort to doing this, but again, like, you know, we've heard from over here, it's, you know, something has to happen sooner.
Yeah.
I believe, but again, I appreciate all the information. I'm super pleased that this is a public meeting, and I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this to really discuss the ins and outs of this, but again, I've got 40 years of looking at that, and 30 years of photographs, and I'm hoping something changes fast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments.
I'm Henry Soria. I've been living in IV for 36 years. And I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with a material called carbon fiber. And but the one thing a lot of people aren't familiar about it with is that carbon fiber, you have a cantilever and you put a little scratch on it. Guess where your new setback is, where that scratch is? It's called a score mark. It'll break off. And one thing that I noticed in the recent collapse, that pictures came out in the news, that fracture that occurred was along the fence line, which tells me something. And that is when you drill into the concrete. Now, concrete is not a fibrous structure, it's a crystalline structure. When you drill into the concrete to anchor that fence in there, guess what you've just done? Introduce a score mark. And if you notice the crack, of course, when it breaks, it's not a linear break. It can fracture off one way or the other. If you look at it, it goes along the fence and it just fractures into the fence. So it's misleading to say that that broke within inside the fence. It actually broke underneath the fence. I guess what I'm trying to get at is if you do set a setback, it's more, setting a setback to the building is one thing, but setting a setback to the fence is another completely different topic. Because you're going to have to put that fence in an area that is definitely, you have compacted soil, shale, whatever underneath. And remember, the geology of Del Playa bluff tops, it changes from point A to point B. You have shale, you have sort of like a clay type of structure, you have all kinds of different dirt, minerals, things like that. So, it varies. There's a lot of variance along that bluff top. But the bottom line is if you put a fence, and there's no disagreement that you need a higher fence. I'm totally behind that. I think, higher fence is definitely going to help out in some cases. But it's a question of like now where that patio is going to break off at. And the smart money says it'll break off at that score line. It's going to come down to the methods used for applying the fence, and the type of fencing used, the anchoring methods. Now, you talk about what the maximum capacity of people on one of those balconies is, and should the landlords do something? They ain't gonna do a darn thing about it. They don't care as long as they're getting that rent check. That's all that matters. They could admonish their tenants to not have 100 people on the balcony, 200 people on the balcony. Well, right now the max is 250 based on the new ordinances that just passed. But they don't care. The landlords just, as long as the rent check's coming in. How do you enforce that? So, with that said, you're dealing with a mechanical issue, that being the score marks along the patio, where the fences go, and the type of fencing and anchoring materials used. And the other one is attitudes. You can affect one, you're not going to affect the other. And with the long-range development plan, going on to 2025, expect more people to be in the area, and those balconies will be more and more crowded. I personally feel that a lot of those buildings should be torn and moved towards the street more, because parking is no longer required since we have public transportation available. You don't have to provide parking in apartment complexes. Move those buildings closer to the street. A classic example is, I believe it's 6825 Del Playa. They're right on the street, but they have this huge, in fact, you showed the aerial pictures of it. You see a huge setback. That's not going anywhere soon. So that's my take on it.
I want to say, I agree 100% that the best thing that could be done would be to move the buildings right to the edge of Delphi to get any kind of relief from the requirements for parking. You get that in a mixed-use building, you get 50% reduction typically. If you didn't need that parking lot, you could use that space, pull that building back, the owners would jump over there, jump to get that chance to do it. I think
If the coastal commission will let you.
Yes,
And
that's true.
That's the stumbling block.
That is, yeah.
That is the biggest stumbling block, is
Oh.
the coastal commission feels that coastal access is sacrosanct, right? And it's important,
Yes, it is.
but they don't want to lose one parking space. We have fought with them over that for accessory dwelling units and that type of thing in the coastal zone, and we do not win. So that's a challenge that we have to deal with.
One more thing I'm gonna add, you asked, it's gonna be a while before Oceanside, Mountainside Apply becomes Oceanside. 2077 is 34 inches a year.
That's your
and
prediction.
That's the best case, that's the best case prediction. 38 inches a year is worst case predictions. Usually you get there in El Nino, but on average it's 32 to 36. At 34 inches a year, it's gonna be 2077.
I don't think I'll be there.
Maybe,
I'll try.
maybe.
I'll try to be.
Another thing regarding what Lisa said about the coastal commission, there are sections that are protected by the seawalls. And those parcels are protected better. They have more of the earth in front of the houses as it should be, and those are not allowed. It's, the collection of rocks that someone referenced, those are being stored. That a lot of owners are putting those behind the seawalls, picking up the broken concrete, saying this is our real estate, we're going to keep it.
They think it protects them.
Yeah, and there's something to that, I think. But again, the coastal commission banned that. 90s. Oh, and the fence, there is a technique, typically the fences were in place, like a normal fence in your backyard, would be you drill a hole, that creates a line of weakness. Now what they're doing is reverting to, partially because of the practicality of it, they know that they may move again, they're building a above ground bracing system where they can be bolted, unbolted, and so that, and a taller fence will give a bigger load, it's a longer lever, if you will, but they're trying to avoid that scoring that you mentioned with this new technique.
And that has to be set 5 feet back from the edge of the water, so that
Right.
it is a secure area.
Yes.
I just have one more question. I was thinking about this when we were talking about like, taking entire structures and moving them close. What's the timeline on having portions of like structures get set back? And I'm assuming tenants are not allowed to be in those properties when that construction is happening. Have you seen examples of tenants being like vacated for a certain amount of time? And I don't know if this is a you question or the other question, but like, is there any support in place for those students or tenants in the event that they are forced to be displaced for a certain amount of time?
That I
Not
don't
by
know
us.
about. Yeah,
Not by
not by us.
Okay.
Not by us, but they are required to vacate
Okay.
when the building has to be kept back, or if it's not safe.
Yeah, definitely.
I just think a quick note, some of the property owners out there are like really great and really cooperative and rush to do the right thing. Some are really resistant. And Lisa and I have even had some property owners want us to water down the requirements that we have now and change those. So there's some folks that have the viewpoint that's the opposite of you all. But we haven't done that. I'm just letting you know that there's people that are saying the opposite too. So I'm not doing that.
Yeah, we had a lot of pushback on our change in the policy, and some tense phone calls with them, so we did not change it. We did not change it.
All right, well, thank you. Are there any public comments on Zoom? No. All right, thank you everyone for those public comments. I'll come back to the board for commentary and questions on directors.
I just wanted to follow up on providing support for people who are displaced. I work for IVCSD. And so that's my role on this board. And I'll tell you, in the most recent situation where we had people evacuated, our student affairs and our community housing office staff were on site, and we're making sure to work with UCSB students. We do have over 200 units available that are empty on campus that are available. So if there is pushback from landowners that they want to wait till a property is vacant, there is space on campus for people, UCSB students.
Great, that's good to know.
Actually,
Director Schultz.
Sorry, I just wanted to get a sense of like the numbers here. So what percentage of the properties on Oceanside DP are currently at risk for an event happening like the one that just happened due to either excess load or storms? Like just an approximate number, like what percentage of those properties would be at risk for something like that?
Hard to say.
I would say, maybe under 20%, I would say that possible something, that's why we're watching them, you know, something could happen.
Thank you.
Supervisor.
yeah, I just wanted to, before we close, just talk about the fact that this is also a Santa Barbara City College issue with, I believe in this most recent incident, thank goodness there were no injuries, but I think roughly half of the students living there are Santa Barbara City College students. So conversations we're having here, and obviously we have an amazing link in Jonathan and Boot, but need to be happening there as well, that this is not just an isolated Isla Vista UCSB challenge, it's there as well, and our office is working on that, but we just need to keep those efforts front in mind that this is a Santa Barbara City College partnership problem as well as a challenge for us here at UCSB.
Thank you. Any other directors have comments or questions? Yes.
I just wanted to comment on the fact that I think that when we're talking about bluff erosion, it ties together a lot of the issues that our community is facing. That's obvious when it comes to housing, when we're at risk of losing a bunch of these properties. But I think all of the comments raised about especially communication between landlords and tenants are super pertinent. I personally know a couple of the people who live at the property that just experienced a bluff collapse, and there was a complete lack of communication between them and their landlord, unless it was facilitated by a third party. And so, you know, maybe that's the sheriff's office and that's all we can do, but it really raises the larger question of like the exploitative nature when it comes to leasing to students. And so I would love to see us continue to explore increasing awareness of students when leasing on these bluffside properties, like what they're actually getting.
Yes, Director Schultz.
Following up on that point, I was wondering if anybody had like an approximation for how many different property owners own the total number of properties along Oceanside DP.
There's one owner that owns.
Yeah, a couple that own a whole bunch.
Yeah, and then there's some that own individual properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some that own just 2 or 3. Yeah, I don't know, out of the 81, wild guess, I don't know, maybe
One owns
50 owners.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but one owns like 30 properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it varies widely.
Thank you.
All right, we don't see other comments from our directors. I want to share some comments myself. First of all, thank you three for being here. Thank you, Supervisor Couch, for being here. Thank you to the public for being here and sharing your comments with us. It's really informative to me to hear from the staff, to hear from the public, and to get more eyes and ears on this issue. I heard some really great comments and suggestions today. One I want to highlight that was a favorite is how can we share some of the information that is in leases regarding bluff safety with more folks who don't necessarily live or did not necessarily sign that lease agreement, because we know more citizens go on Del Playa than any other street. So there's always a guest at anyone's balcony, so there's an increased risk there. One comment, question. I'm trying to figure out how to formulate this in a helpful way. I'm wondering, when we talked about the bluff study or the bluff policy, it's nominal to Isla Vista, it's the Isla Vista bluff policy, but it right now regards structural safety. Is there pathways that we can pursue to have a bluff policy that addresses human safety? Since we know that Del Playa is the most populous street in Isla Vista, there's a lot of other issues that our district looks to be hands-on with when it comes to safety of Isla Vistans, and this is one that I think, or I'm not gonna think for others, but I feel a challenge in how do we protect our residents. And so I'm wondering if are there avenues to change the policy? It's clearly a one-off policy for Isla Vista. How can we include more human safety and less have the emphasis be only on structural safety? Those are the comments that I heard from folks about concerns about being on a balcony or being on a patio. The patio itself will fall and survive, but the humans will not, or they might have a very altered life. So I'm wondering if there's things we can do as a district to try and push this envelope a little bit. We've been real successful so far to push envelopes and other things. I feel like this is one we could be successful in.
This policy is really related to structures, right? So it's not the right policy to amend or, attach something to. But I know that different departments meet and talk about safety in Isla Vista overall. And there's lots of things to be concerned about, right? Like, whether there's drug use and overdoses and Narcan. And so maybe that's the forum to talk about just general safety issues. And I'd have to really give it some thought about how it's not really a land use thing. So it's not really a planning and development thing, but it is a county and a community issue, right? And figuring out, and a university issue. And how does that, I don't think I have your answer, but it's a good question. Yeah. See how you might be able to do something else.
And I would just add, I think what we want from you is to understand how can we use planning and development to help us with safety. That's what my question was about earlier, is what can we be doing more to influence human behavior? How can we encourage, how can we force landowners to build the fences now, as opposed to waiting for a building permit, right? Those are the things I'm thinking of, is how can we be more proactive to help with human safety?
Like I said, I think the land use side of it is limited. Like we can't force the landowners to get the permit.
You can't
legally. No, you can't. You can't. I know, right? Right. But there are, I know the sheriff's involved, and I know the DA is involved on dealing with other safety issues, and so there's conversations, and P&D can certainly be part of that, but we're one piece and we deal with one aspect of it, but certainly are happy to contribute where we can.
We have a meeting coming up this week, right?
Yeah, Friday.
Friday.
Or no, the landlords are meeting on the 21st.
Okay, so we have IVC this week. So.
That's right. Yeah.
You're invited, Lisa.
Thank you.
Yes.
Question, do we know if the Shermer family out of Ojai has sued the landlord? Because wouldn't a big settlement make a difference?
I do not have that knowledge. I don't know. We don't.
I think he fell from a county park.
They say it was from a party.
We don't know that.
Oh, they do now.
That was not one.
Another, hopefully an easier question. I'm wondering, so I asked earlier about, having more regular partnership with the fire department in order to have more drone flights, to have more visual representation. If we succeed in that partnership, can we, call on you all to come and have this conversation again in the future and like maybe an annual basis or maybe a different subset of this, but I feel like this is very informative for me as somebody who gets to be at these meetings a lot. But also for the masses, this will be a very informative conversation to keep having. You suggested education, and I'm really thankful that the three of you are here. We all have all kinds of technical questions about this, and so we learn the most when we get to ask them out loud. So hopefully we can continue to ask you to come. Well, I don't see any further comments or questions from my directors, so I will move us on to the next item. But thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Supervisor Taft, for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah. I just don't know what the. Yeah. And that was just part of the note.
How are you doing? Good, nice to see you. It's been a whirl.
Yeah, thank you for.
I own this itself. There's a clock.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I
I'm curious. Yeah, no, there's so much jurisdiction overlap. I'm so confused.
Jonathan, I don't know if it could be any colder in here. It's really cold.
I can close the door.
Maybe that door.
We have to keep it open because it locks. If it's closed, people need to be able to get access. And I'll close this one right here.
Okay, I don't know if that was, I think I'm gonna direct. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. Busy, too busy. How are you? I'm hanging on by.
I was literally telling my mom earlier, I was like, Mom,
Who do we need to talk to?
Hey, acoustic project's awesome. I can hear myself, I can hear you. No, like, we'll have we'll continue to recess period. No, I was, yeah. I mean, it's great, but I mean, I've lost the music.
and then
Get
I'll
us under
restart it.
control.
Okay, all right, thank you, everyone. I'll reconvene this meeting at 7:33 PM. We'll now move on to item 4.2, our Spring Festival budget.
Okay, I'm gonna present this one. Maya is out sick today. So, we've been working with, in-house. Maya has been working to plan this with our festival ad hoc committee to figure out what we're gonna do for the Spring Festival 2024 on April 6th. So this is the proposed budget that we're seeking board approval for, so that we can get started on ordering items and moving forward. The budget's very similar to last year's budget. The main change, or this most significant difference, is that we're not paying $20,000 for a consultant to plan this, and we're doing it in-house. And we redirected that money towards more free food for people to keep them fed and hydrated. We're also having more water as well. So the same features, it's gonna, we're gonna apply to have it at Little Acorn Park. We're gonna have local bands. We're gonna be able to pay them more to perform that day, and hopefully not perform at the Bluffside properties. We're gonna have restrooms on Sabado and at the community center parking lot. And otherwise, everything else pretty much the same as last year. We don't have to pay for a new mural, because we have the one behind you still. And so we're hoping to have approval today so that Maya can start placing orders and making commitments with people, so we can have it all lined up less than 2 months from now. But a lot of the planning has already been in motion, so we're pretty much ready to go once we have approval to secure orders.
All right, thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from the board? Yes, Director
What is
Dasher.
the fencing on DP? What is that?
So this is we're not sure we'll end up needing this. It depends on how soon the county parks are gonna get fenced with the higher level. But what we were thinking to do is, if they do plan to have the higher fence up pretty soon at the county-owned parks on DP, but if they don't, we'd want to get a temporary marburg fence that's in the middle of the park, so that we create like a higher fence that's like a temporary chain link fence, just to prevent people from being near the bluff in the parks.
So it's park property?
County parks.
County.
So like Walter Capps Park and Silacott Park and Tonkin Park. So putting something up in the middle of the park so that we keep people away from the bluff edge. But that's if the county higher fence doesn't get in by then. So we're gonna keep an eye on it.
Director Freeman.
Am I remembering correctly that maybe it was this event last year and it was 2 years ago, maybe it was a different event that was sort of big, similar to this event, and but like not this event, that we had a lot of turnout, whether number of food was because even though we did not have food, or even though we ran out of food very early?
Yeah, so the only event where we had free food at was the Spring Festival in 2023. We did run out of food, maybe like before the last hour. But this year we have more than double the food budget. And then we also have a different time frame for the event. So we made it 2 PM to 7 PM, so that it's a shorter period.
For what it's worth, the reason why I'm asking is kind of drifting the other direction, although it's an opinion, maybe you want to wait till later.
Go ahead.
Is that half the budget of this event is being allocated towards food. And it is not clear to me that the goals that we discussed at various points for the event, that's gonna drive those specific goals, whether it be, if we measure it as the number of people we feed, sure, or measure it as the number of people who are there while we have food. But as far as like having people who are there when the food is not what's there and what's driving them, or as far as like trying to minimize the number of people who are going out and doing things at all during that period of time or something, having a big function that gets you out of the house to go get the free food and then maybe send you off somewhere else if we're not providing something and cleaning enough right there or to get them to do it at all. Versus the first time we ran this event, I mean, Kim and I, when we were doing like ID First Fridays, had events that were at similar or even larger scale, and we never had food. And we were able to get people to come out and be excited about this thing. And I just wondering, because it's now half the budget of a fairly heftily priced event is to provide food for the people who chose to go out and do Deltopia, and all the rest of us who aren't going to do that are paying for it.
Yeah, so the thinking is, well, it's very hard to compete against Deltopia. It's a very attractive, competitive event that a lot of people want to go to, but none of those parties on BP have free food. Last year, what we saw is long lines for the food. People were in line for 45 minutes sometimes waiting to get the free food. And so that was time away from DP, which was one of the goals of the event, is to keep people off of Del Valle, off of the parties for some time. We know we're not going to remove them completely the entire time, but so that's one of the goals, is keeping them away from DP. And the lines were pretty long last year that people were.
Are we gonna have as long lines this time, or are they certainly have it slow this time?
Yeah, well, no, I think
that's apparently a feature for their metrics.
Yeah, and the other thing is the food is also part of it, is to help people to stay sober, or to be hydrated and have nutrition, so that they don't have, there were a lot of emergency medical calls last year. And so this is a way to keep people from having an emergency. And we're gonna have entertainment. So we're gonna have bands, a rap artist, a DJ. So there will be other things and art. So there'll be activities for people to do, but we know that any activity we do is hard to compete against a party on DP. It's just, I mean, when we had the event without free food 3 years ago, or 2 years ago in 2022, we had only about 1,000 people attend. But when we had it with the free food, we had 3,000 to 4,000 people attend. So,
because I'm actually very seriously interested in this, is the reason why because they're also getting alcohol at those parties? Because otherwise, I can't think of any advantage those parties could have over a party that we throw in a park with a budget and a bunch of bands and a bunch of permanent equipment that we're allowed to actually have music at various points, and like.
I think it's culture. I mean, I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do, is we change the culture. And so the culture is what you do as you walk around in Del Valle and drink. And so, we're trying to say, hey, we got something better than that going on. And then we're building a culture over time. So the food part of it, but I think it's also just the wasting it.
And it's legitimately cool. People want to be there. I mean, there's 20,000 people who show up, so there's something there that people want. But we're at least offering something that's not going to be available at all at any of these parties.
And it's healthy.
Yeah.
It just also has like when we talked, not you and I, not this group, but I say we, like people that had various meetings and talked about all of this back 8 years ago, when I was getting involved in this. Not those were the first talks, not those were the last talks, the talks that I have to remember. There's also a lot of discussion about the businesses in the area, trying to drive people from there over to here, and saying a lot of the businesses in this area are restaurants. And when you go to restaurants, and they're like, oh, so you're saying that you're gonna drive a bunch of people over to here and then hand out $35,000 worth of free food. It also has this feeling of this letdown with respect to the promise of the big boom of the. And so and at that point, I think they would rather just kill it. It's just
well, all the vendors we used last time were Isla Vista businesses.
Okay.
We had Woodstock's, Co-op, Dankfuls, Rogers Tacos, and another one. So
Right.
we are focusing on.
All right, I'm just wrong.
One, since we started to veer in a comment, I want to second Director Topless' comment, which is that we're competing against, I was going to jump out and say decades of culture, because people have been spending their time partying on Isla Vista for decades, but I'll limit that to a decade of culture of this Deltopia event, or maybe it's more than a decade now, I'm not sure. But we're fighting this huge trend. We're slowly getting the way out, because we only get to have this attempt once a year. So I personally am in favor of the fact that we have food for the reasons that our staff share, which is hydration and nutrition. So people aren't merely by accident or sometimes by intention only consuming alcohol and other substances, and instead they consume other more natural things that hopefully help their day not be terrible. Because we did see such a high amount of safety issues come out. This is one of the things that we can do that I think is very effective for Isla Vistans. So yeah, that's my personal director defense of that part of that budget. I don't know if others want to comment or question. Director Deschler.
I just have a I don't know, question. I have another question.
You can question or comment.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. My question is, what is the 10,000? It says on Sabado plus CC lot. What's the 10,000?
Those are the restrooms, the porta potties like we did last year.
You gotta scroll
Oh,
your
got it.
screen a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
No
I'm
problem.
so
That's
technologically
renting.
challenged. Thank you for telling me how to use Excel.
Are there any
That's
other?
the same amount we did last year.
Yeah,
and it
okay.
seemed to be
No,
good.
I'm sorry, I just saw the 10,000.
Director Topper.
I just want to say that I attended at least one committee meeting with Maya, and I think she's got so many great ideas, and I love that we're not spending a lot of money on an outside, festival packager, that we're really spending money on our local talent. And I think she's got a lot of great ideas, and she's really good at networking. So I just have been very excited being on that committee with her and supporting a lot of the great ideas that she has. And I just also want to say that I am distressed that the amount of money budgeted for IVRPD is so high. And as I've mentioned before, according to their published fee schedule, it looks like a large event in any park other than Anascoyo should be $350.
Yeah.
So I would like for us to explore that.
Yeah, I just put in the budget, or Maya put in the budget, what we had been charged before, but one of the goals, we are trying to have that leadership meeting with them, and this is one of the things will be on the agenda to discuss, hopefully to resolve. But, we're being conservative here. Yeah.
Director Schultz.
I just want to second Director Topless' comment. Maya has done research on how to throw the best possible festival. And I truly believe that everything that she has here has been thought out in 10 different ways and 10 different possibilities, and she's found the best one. But I do want to second the fact that this has been super, super thought out, and she's had some amazingly fun ideas in those committee meetings.
Director Brand.
Well, I also want to third the praise for Maya, just because even though I haven't been in the committee meetings, I've seen the fruits of those labor with already putting out a call for bans and working with the community, being as proactive as possible to try and build those connections. So I'm really excited about the formula that we have. I think we figured out what the formula was last year, and now we're just making it the best that it can be by having our staff take the lead on it rather than relying on consultants. And I want to thank the committee for helping work with Maya to put the proposal together. I'm just very excited at what the product looks like. Carrie did beat me to the punch on the one concern that I have, which is it's just going to be, I find it hard to support including that amount of money for the park fee until we have been able to have a leadership meeting. We discussed this in November when it was called to our attention how high the fee was. And, my position on this continues to be if there has been a fee study done and a fee process and it is in their policies, that is and there is a reason why that fee is that fee, I don't have a problem with it at all. I also don't have a problem with us charging them fees in order to recoup our costs if they are using our facilities, which I know that they do on a regular basis. But I just want there to be parity and equity between how we are treating each other. If we're going to give ourselves waivers, if we're going to give ourselves fee discounts, or if we're going to charge full price, I just want it to be in alignment. It's hard for me to stare down that number when it just doesn't feel very partnership oriented, especially when this is, our biggest contribution to public safety, possibly year round, by helping reduce the impact of Deltopia, getting people off of Del Playa, bringing them into the park where they get to enjoy the facility, Those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Any other directors have comments or questions they would like to share? Director Freeman.
Yeah, I will also, despite the fact that oftentimes in the meeting, I have ERPD, and care with them or anything or whatever, like say with that. I definitely agree on this, that like, it is, if we're not being charged the thing we're supposed to be charged, that's unfair. I really wanted us to pay the invoice that our staff had agreed to pay, but I also at that time wanted us to figure out why we're being charged that and either fix it for in the documentation on the website and for everyone else, or we should not.
We're just trying to schedule a meeting.
Yeah.
It's been tough.
Now we're all just saying it now.
Yeah.
All ganging up on you.
No, I know.
Like politicians wanting to make our point.
All right. Hearing no further comments. Oh,
So on such note, I will be voting no on this, not so to the food thing, but because I also just don't think that we should be doing these kinds of large scale events as not the recreation district without a recreation. My usual refrain, I know no one agrees, but I'm just explaining why I'm voting.
and with that, I'll ask, is there a motion for Director Topliff?
I'll move to approve this budget. I will second.
All right, and a second by Craig. And I will now ask the public, is there any public comment on this motion? See no public comment on this motion, so I'll go to the board for a vote. All directors who are in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no.
No.
And this motion passes 6-1-0-0. We'll now move on to item 4.3, our IV Safe agenda preview for the February meeting.
So we have a shorter IV Safe agenda than usual this time. We just didn't have as many requests for items and items that were ready to be discussed this meeting coming up, but the three topics are going to be Deltopia, reporting out. We have a work group as a subset of IV Safe that's been working on logistical planning for Deltopia. So we're gonna report out about that and talk with the group about what's going on for Deltopia this year. We're gonna continue the discussion on the solutions for fentanyl use and help develop more partnerships to support us with the new vending machine that's gonna be coming up. And then there'll be a session with the lieutenant on the new ordinances that went into effect last weekend and questions about their implementation that AS requested to have an additional to this one. And we also now have a slate of future meetings. The next meetings will be in April, August, and October for the rest of this year. And a future agenda item that'll be coming up as we wrap up the parking and mobility study is discussing with IV Safe road, sidewalk, and mobility safety.
All right, thank you for that update. Do any directors have questions at this time? Director Brand.
Well, really excited to see fentanyl use and the use of our SBC funds being something that's part of this discussion. Those funds come from settlement with the big pharmaceutical companies that started this crisis, and I think it's great that we have the opportunity to figure out how we can use them best in IV to keep our residents safe. My request for a future agenda item for our running list is I've been in touch with a number of long-term residents that have been frustrated with neighborhood issues, mostly around surrounding noise. And I would like to see there be a discussion about a peer-to-peer safety program to help address those concerns. Regardless of whether or not it's my opinion that law enforcement should be responding to those calls above some of the minor alcohol crimes, it's clear that it's not happening. And I think that the most appropriate way in my mind would be to bring back a peer-to-peer program like we used to have with UCID. I know that program has been brought back and that it's more along the lines of what the safety stations are doing. But I really think there's a huge opportunity to engage students, residents in helping to solve these problems themselves before they get called in, building better relationships between neighbors. And I would love to see it be something that is discussed more in depth by the group, because it would require, some buy-in from law enforcement to be able to help promote the program when they get calls like that. And obviously it would require some organization, either from us, from student groups, from other partners. So that's my pitch for a future item.
That's really helpful framing, because Lieutenant Tesla and I are meeting with those long-term resident neighbors tomorrow morning, because they had asked to put something on the IB Safe agenda, but we wanted to work with them to frame that topic instead of having it just be open-ended. So it's not going to be on this meeting, but we can put it towards the April meeting with, an actual outcome and goal, not just talking about the issue, but having a goal attached to it. So that's helpful.
Questions? Any other directors have questions at this time? See no questions, I'll go to the public. Is there any public comment on this issue? All right, I'll see no public comments. I'll go back to the board. Is there any board commentary and questions continuing on this item?
Well,
Yes.
we just had this discussion about balcony safety, and so we talked about maybe adding that to an IB safe. That was Lisa's suggestion. I don't know if we want to do that. It seems like we're having good conversations, but so that's something maybe to consider. And then the only other thing is, I can't imagine we're talking 10 minutes on Deltopia, but
There's not a huge update. I mean, if people want to, the agenda is shorter than the time allotted for the 2 hours.
Yeah.
So if people want to
got
end up talking more,
yeah.
there's just not much, we're going to update on the planning and what's going on.
Yeah.
We don't, but there could be more discussion. We just don't think there's anything controversial to be shared, so.
For my part, I'm happy to see the length, because I think we spend a lot of time talking, and I'm glad that we get to talk about some more action-oriented things.
All right. I see no further comments from the board. Is that enough direction?
I think we're good for this meeting. It's this Friday from 12 to 2 in this room.
Perfect. We have our new soundproofing to show off.
It's so great. I
It's-
can't believe how great it is.
Yeah.
We don't even have rugs on the ground.
Yeah.
And there's space too on the ceiling, but we haven't done that yet. We might not need to.
There's one on the ceiling?
There was a second phase of the project for ceiling.
Where is that?
It's this.
Oh.
It's
Glorious.
the color, it's the beige color, whatever the color is.
All right.
We're gonna have to do a ribbon cutting with Joyce Dudley when we get the ceiling done.
And with that, we'll move on to our fourth agenda item, our change order with Dixon Resources Unlimited. Yes.
So I prepped you guys last meeting that this was probably happening. So it did happen. So this is a change order to be able to finish the needs assessment section and the drafting of recommendations for the mobility plan. It was just more unfinished work than originally analyzed. But when we looked at it with them in December, the good news is they've already finished most of the work. So it's not for naught. I've already been, I've gotten drafts for most of this. And we do have a date, time certain for the reports to come to you, which is March 12th. So this is just to get us to the finish line, but I'll give you my word that I've looked at the drafts so far and they've been very good. And so we just need to get this done now. And you could see why there was a lot. It's just very different than what we had before. And it's more in line with what we wanted.
So great. I'll move to approve. Second.
All right. Is there any board commentary on this motion?
Oh, sorry. You already did a second.
there-
today. You can do the next one.
Is there any public comment on this motion? I see no public comment on this motion, so I'll come back to the board for a vote. All those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. And this motion passes 7-0-0-0. Now we'll move on to item 5, resolution 24-3, sponsorship of Starfish Connection fundraiser.
This is a local nonprofit that provides crisis intervention funding to families in Isla Vista, and they work with LEAP, or formerly Ivy Youth Project. So they requested from us $500, and I see there's a typo here that still has the Black is Beautiful gala, but they requested from us $500 to support their fundraiser and as to further their work in Isla Vista to support Isla Vista families in crisis. What they do is if somebody, their car broke down and they need something immediately to get going for the next day, they give them that money to help them move on. So, and they work with, like I said, LEAP to identify families in ID that are in crisis and need help. And so they reached out to Maya and she brought this forward.
All right, are there any questions from any director this time? Is there any public comment on this item at this time? All right, is there any board commentary on this item?
I think we should support, and then I think we should also, as the board, all participate in the cold plunge. I'll do it down, yeah.
I'll do it, yeah. 100%. Yes, Director Grant.
I will volunteer for the cold plunge, and I am also excited to support this. I know they do great work for the community. These services are so needed.
Okay.
My one sort of addendum to this is that we have a policy for nonprofit requests for funding.
We don't, but we've gotten 2 now in a row, so it is something to start having in place.
Yeah, I would like to see that, and I know there's a variety of ways that it could be done, so that we maybe have a set budget line item there to try to control costs. In the sense of wanting to support our nonprofits and wanting to support them, with some equity. If we've got one request, we've got another one, then there's probably more that are in the pipeline and could be coming. And I also know that we have service contracts with some nonprofits, so it's just something to think about.
It's on the policy committee list now.
Yes,
To that point, I know the city of Goleta has a program where they give funding to organizations that apply, and they do it on a regular basis. It's, it's maybe more organized than our community is, but at some point, it's a nice way to get requests out from people and then be able to support them on a regular basis.
Yeah, we tried doing something like that in 2018 or 2019.
Oh, yeah.
We did, and it had its struggles to implement, but I think now we're in a better place to do something.
Yeah.
The county has something similar. There's a specific pot of money specifically for racial justice grant, but then in addition to that, the supervisorial offices have funds that they can apportion to nonprofits as well.
Good best practices out there for us.
Right, is there any other board comment on this item? Is there a motion on this resolution?
Move approval of this resolution.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on this motion? See no public comments, so I'll come back to the board for a vote. All directors who are in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. And this motion passes 7-0-0-0. This event is going to be on the 24th February.
February 24th. What day is that? Saturday or
It's Saturday. It's the day after my birthday. I love cold plunge. Is the cold plunge going to be in the ocean?
Yeah, look better.
Oh, perfect. Even better.
No wetsuits.
I know, no wetsuit. All right. And that concludes our discussion and action items. We move on to our fifth area, our reports. Are there reports from any other members of the board? Are there reports from any standing and ad hoc committees?
Committee.
Yeah, parking committee.
Chair.
Okay.
You don't say.
So we will, yeah, the parking, steering committee will be meeting Thursday, correct? And we've continued to chug along in our data collection. I suggest those who are interested, look at the old recorded meetings or the old data. It's very informative. We concluded, not we, Dixon concluded our study of our survey report with Isla Vista residents and guests. We got 1,290 some responses, which I'm particularly proud of as somebody who sends a lot of surveys from UCSB students. I've never gotten that much response, so good for them. And yeah, the data is real interesting. I won't go into the details, but I hope that people look into it. There's no shockers, I'll say that, but things are maybe a little bit more in the red than you might expect. Yeah, real great information. I look forward to our steering committee meeting. I look forward to continuing our timeline with Dixon. They're moving right along. There's not really any hiccups. They're gonna conclude data collection in March, and then there'll be another round of the meet and greets, correct?
Yeah, they'll be coming back in person to share the recommendations, their draft recommendations, and meet with all the same groups again to see their thoughts on it.
So hopefully from that point on, we'll start to have more policy conversations. Yeah, this really big unwieldy ball of parking is moving along. Director Freeman.
One specific thing that was reported on at that meeting that I thought was very interesting was the 15 to 20% of the cars parked on Isla Vista streets seem to be, not necessarily, seem to be out of compliance with 72-hour parking rule. There are all sorts of interesting discussions and ramifications that you can have based upon that, but that was the data point that was reported in the meeting. I thought was fascinating.
Moving on to a different topic, I'll share on the Goleta Library Advisory Commission. We were scheduled to have our New Year meeting for 2024 on February 5th, but that meeting was canceled due to the storm, so I don't have a update from there. But when we do meet again, I'll share that information with you all. Yeah, any other reports folks like to share? I'll move on to our report from District Council.
Thank you. I just have a brief report. So when I came on as general counsel, it's just me this whole time. But I wanted to inform the board that I am being on an assistant general counsel. He will be assisting me, showing up to meetings if I'm not here. And just, providing me coverage and support along the way. His name is Payam Mostafavi.
First name?
Payam. P-A-Y-A-M. Mostafavi. He is a graduate of UCSD. He lives in Isla Vista. He is familiar with this culture and, the atmosphere of everything that we're trying to do here. So he's very excited to come on board. I would like to introduce you all to him via Zoom on the next meeting, just so that his face. I'm really excited, so I think it'll be a great match.
So he lives in Isla Vista?
Not currently.
Oh, I was gonna say, wow, that is amazing. Okay, he used to live in Isla Vista.
He used
Okay.
to live in Isla Vista
Got
when
it.
he went to UCSB.
Okay, got it.
Graduated in 2016, I believe. So, yes.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
That's
a
exciting.
really
Congratulations.
warm update. And thank you for that news, and I'll move on to our report from general manager and staff.
So I have a lot good number of reports today, good news all around. On community engagement, our social media keeps reaching new heights in terms of our reach and engagement. I think we're getting 1,000 people watching our stories on Instagram regularly, like over 300 people engaging with our posts. So that's a really good sign. Two, we promoted bluff safety during the storm on social media and email. We sent the list of houses out to the public for people to be aware. We worked with the lieutenant to host a town hall on the new ordinances that we hosted in here with the bands and DJs and promoters and other artists. And then we put together a flyer sheet that has gone out on social media, but will go out in person as well. And, we've been working with these organizations that can't do what they were doing before at private residences to try to move some of that activity in here. And some of them are seeming pretty excited to host events, official events at the community center now.
Nice.
We have on March 7th coming up a sidewalk walk where we're going to have volunteers go around the community to identify areas where there's raised and cracked and unsafe sidewalks that we can then compile and submit to the county for them to repair. But they did do a round of repairs that we had on the list for a while around the loop just recently. You might see it in front of Embarcadero Hall. But that's, the county doesn't actively fix sidewalks in Isla Vista. It needs to be reported. So we're doing an organized effort to report them. We promoted one of our Isla Vista Beautiful crew members to the team lead position. So Katie Juice, she got promoted yesterday to be in that role. And we have, our lighting work is going well. We conducted a photometric study of the north part of IV, and that's measuring how many foot candles are on the ground. Foot candles is just how bright it is. So we're gonna have a good measurement of is this 4-foot candles? Is it 7 over here? Is it 0? So we'll be able to start building towards a standard of what we think is good. We've gotten a bit of a push from the county to speed up our work on recommended lighting projects and areas, but we've given them some recommendations, but we're trying to ask them to slow down a little bit in this case, just so that we can make sure we get the most out of the one-time money that's allocated. We want to do it right. Maya's been working with Covina, the interpersonal violence investigator, to continue to update the survivor resources on the website, and they're going to be planning a meet and greet in spring quarter. And Maya and I also met with Sayer, our mediator, who's been our mediator since 2018. Who, like I mentioned, he's moving on soon. Sometime this year, there's no hard deadline, but he's working with us to come up with ideas for redesigning the program and how we can move forward in a new, status quo. One of the things is we're gonna have to raise the wage for the mediator. We pay only $50 an hour right now, which is way below market. So that's going to be just, I'm going to propose that we move him up to a adjusted wage. He's not doing much work anyways. I mean, I'm talking 10 hours a month at the most. So it's not a huge financial impact, but I think it'll just get us used to it sooner. But we won't be able to recruit someone new at $50 an hour who's a licensed attorney. But we had a really robust conversation. There's a lot of opportunities with the mediation program and different directions we can go. And we'll have that with the board at the session once we're more prepared in April. The community center's got some new exciting events. So we're taking their space right now because it was, for a good cause for the bluff safety. But usually on Tuesday nights, there's groove nights at the community center. So bands can come and practice, which they're not able to do in other places anymore, but they come and practice here, and members of the public can come and watch them practice. And it's kind of we're harkening back to the old days of Isla Vista when there was a lot of music and practice locations that people could be in community for. So that's a really great new thing that Maya has gotten off the ground. And tomorrow for Valentine's Day, we're doing the vegan food fair. So we're giving out free vegan food from different Dank Bowls, Ivy Food Co-op, others. You guys see the acoustics is done. Well, part 1 is done. We'll see if we need part 2. And our meeting with the county on the solar lot got delayed to next week. So we were going to talk about it today in closed session, but we'll talk about it next board meeting instead, since we're meeting with them on Tuesday now. I already mentioned that the STEP grant existing conditions and needs assessment will be presented to the board on March 12th. So in a month from now, and that's going really well. And I think we had a good parking update. The existing conditions report and needs assessment drafts are pretty much done for that. I mean, there's a couple sections that are placeholders because we're waiting on some final data, but they are public on the parking committee page on the website. So if anybody else who's not on the committee wants to look at them and submit any feedback to me, please go ahead and I'll get your feedback to the Dixon team to incorporate. We're almost done with phase 1 of outreach. We just have 2 or 3 more meetings left with stakeholders, and then we're gonna start beach interviews. So we have a survey for people who are on the beach. So we'll be on the beach in the morning, early, middle of the day, and at sunset. Talk to them about their experience getting to the beach, parking, transportation, all that. And I think we're gonna add the intercept surveys on the eastern blocks of IB to talk to people as they park, seeing what they're, where they go. So one last thing on the community space / the festival. I think it was mentioned already, but we have artist editions coming up later this month too. So bands and artists of different kinds are gonna be, competing for a spot in the IB Community Festival on April 6th. So let anybody know that that does that. The bluff safety, so yes, the sheriff's office did post notices on all the doors on the bluffs, and then we went out and knocked on doors and talked to people directly to just, have the interactive conversation about the storm, and we'll try to do that again for the storm coming up this weekend. And we didn't have any good date for the retreat, so I'll have to email you guys out once again. We'll go deeper into April now, but we are aiming for a weekend, and it'll be 4 or 5 hours, and there are going to be some consequential discussions for the retreat that are better to happen sooner rather than later in the budget cycle. So if you can make the stretch to make a day available, that would be really appreciated. And that's about it. And we had a couple other items that we pushed off from today, just thinking that we had, this town hall portion and it was going to be a lot. So we have some items that were moved from this meeting to the next board meeting. So just letting you know, like the financial update we were going to do. That was just, we didn't want to couple the 2 big topics at once. So that's my report.
All right, thank you for that report. And I will announce that the next regular meeting of the Board of Directors will take place on February 27th, 2024 at 6 p.m. on Zoom and at Community Room 970. I'll ask real quick of our board members, are there any future agenda items that folks would like to add to our growing list? Yes,
this doesn't have to be a meeting, but I'm just curious if we have got any information from the county on the homeless count that was done in January.
I don't think the info's out.
It's not, the information's not out.
Yeah, I don't think, as far as I know, but I think it'll get presented to the board of supervisors when it is, and we can even ask for a presentation here.
Yeah, I just was curious. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. With that, I will adjourn this meeting.